Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
We have a very special guest on the telephonic device right now.
Rob,
I'll let you do the intros.
We better have a bit of Geelong local footballing royalty on the line at the moment, but we might introduce him as a... Well, this is the GDFL segment, so it's a GDFL legend we're going to have. Ron Watt, good morning to you.
Hey, g'day, Rob. How are you?
Good. Let's deal with the immediate past before we go all the way back. Noel Fanning rang me yesterday to tell me he'd found a classic Geelong and District Football League reserves game from 2007, where on one side we had probably a 43-year-old Daryl Bissett, and on the other side, I think a 44-year-old Ron Watt wearing number 52 for Bannockburn. Great memories of your career out there with the Tigers?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I'll just clear up the fact that I was never... Well, I don't think I was ever a legend, and definitely not a GDFL legend.
No, definitely not. That's quite true, but for the sake of the argument, you are today.
Rob throws around the word legend like it's going out of fashion. He called himself a legend earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, just that decision to go back and play out there. It was interesting. At the time you were still involved heavily at the Geelong Footy Club, if I remember correctly, but you did chip in and help out the Bannockburn Club. Was that more to help them out of, or for a bit of Ronnie Watt's personal reasons?
No, well, I hadn't played for about probably 6 years after I finished at North Shore, and my kids played at Bannockburn. We're living at Bannockburn, and so I was around the club, and they were short one day in the reserves, and I said, gee, it'd be good fun to play again. And they said, well, why don't you play? And I waited until quarter time to get the courage, and I went around and got my gear out of the car, and I started playing, and I loved it, and it was just a great release for me, and it brought back the love of footy and why you actually play again. Because I'd been involved at Geelong for 6 or 7 years by that stage, and you sort of saw football in a slightly different light, and you just were at footy all the time, but you forgot why you actually played in the first place, and just playing again was terrific for me.
That's I wasn't going to go there yet, but I'll go there now because you made an interesting point there about playing for the love of the game. We had David Parkin on a couple of weeks ago, and he gets very frustrated with the way the game is coached, where it's almost robotic, and these kids who, as teenagers, went out and played the game because they loved it. Yes, they were good at it, and yes, they worked hard. So they're taken into a draft system, and in a lot of cases, the fun for them's gone because of the way the game is marshalled. As a coach, it's interesting you say you saw that difference going back to play the game. As a coach, was it difficult for you to sort of start to instigate that robotic type game plan?
Well, it is interesting you talk about that and talk about Parko's reflections on that. And I have a bit to do with Parko with my current job now, and what he's saying is probably reflective of how I felt a bit. I'd coached at Geelong for, as I said, maybe 6 or 7 years, and then started playing again. But I had finished coaching the VFL at that stage, and I was just doing the AFL bench coaching role and doing a few other things at the club around player development and welfare and things like that. And I was probably happy to step out of the absolute 100% day-to-day coaching because I felt like I was losing my real feel for the game. Everything had to be justified. Everything had to be measured. There was too much and too many analytics. Even coming back in then 10 or 12 years ago when I stopped coaching day to day. So I sort of felt that I'd lost my own natural instinct for the game, and I was happy enough to step away from the day to day stuff. So yeah, I probably felt a bit like that, and it brought back the love of the game for me again. And
you certainly had the love of the game. We chucked the word legend around, maybe not at Geelong, but certainly at North Shore. You were part of, followed the Gordon Hines and then Glenn Keith for a period where the North Shore Footy Club were just powerhouses around Geelong. And I guess that was back in the more simpler days for coaching, where you had talented players, a simplistic game plan. You all went out there, had fun, instigated great success for the club. Obviously, great memories there.
Oh yeah, really loved my time at North Shore, and was still there for a long period after I finished at Bannockburn as well. But Again, that word legend, I don't like that word. I coached Geelong West St Peters to the Wooden Spoon for the 3 years before I went to North Shore, and nobody thought I was a legend at Geelong West St Peters. But I didn't coach any differently. It's just I had better players at North Shore, and there was a different mindset about what people expected. We had some great players to work with, but also a great culture that had been built up over many, many years with Gordon Hines and a number of other people out there that expected success. So I'll give you an example. When I went there, I thought I'll take a little bit of coaching wisdom with me, and we'll set some goals. We'll set some short-term goals and some long-term goals, some modern stuff that maybe they hadn't done a lot of. And so the goals had to be specific, achievable, measurable and realistic. So I said, we've got 4 weeks to the first bye. Let's make sure we win at least 3 of the 4 games to start the season. And David McDonald, who had been at North Shore for years, put up his hand. He said, well, which game do you want us to lose then? So his expectation that they were going to win all 4.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That would have set you back just a little.
Yeah, well, it did. I said, I don't want you to lose any, but just in case we lose one, we can still achieve our goals. But it gave me a great insight into how they thought, and maybe some restrictive thinking that I had.
So, Ron, it's Neil, and thanks for joining us on the program. I'm interested. I'm a relative newcomer to Geelong. I've only been in Geelong for sort of 5.5 years, and I hear the North Shore, and I see an underachieving club that just is struggling in the league that they're in. How hard is it for you to have been part of we'll use a shock jock, glory years of a club, and seeing what it's going through now, and how what needs to be done to bring it back to its glory days?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how they do get back to their glory days. And I spent another 10 years at North Shore. After I played at Bannockburn, I went back and helped out, and I just found after 10 years I was drained. So I don't know how people like Ken Ivanme and Karen Ivanme and Dale Purcell, David Milsom, have been there all the time and continue to just work so solidly. There's a whole band of people that have been there, through the 70s, 80s, 90s and into this century, and still doing terrific work, but they're just finding it so hard because there's a lack of kids in that area who are involved in football. Mm. That was the strength of North Shore back in the 70s, 80s and 90s, where there was 1,000 kids went to North Shore Primary School, and now there's only 200.
Yep.
So it's just a cycle, I suppose, but it is harder to engage kids into the one particular sport now. There's so many different options, and it's not an easy way to see how North Shore is going to get out of that. But they are slowly building. There's no doubt about it. They've at least got a good base there now, and they're doing some really good work off field at the moment. And I know they're preparing well for next year. So I hope that we can get things together.
Because I think the other thing is too, we live in a world obviously with instant gratification. One of the things I was critical about with free agency was that all of the players who were playing with clubs that weren't going so well in the AFL decided they'd all go and play for Hawthorn, or they'll all go and play for Richmond or whatever, because they think they get a premiership. I guess if you're looking at a North Shore or a Corio or a Port Arlington in the various leagues, that there's no great attraction for a player to go there for success, and the off-field stuff becomes really important. We've heard some really good things about what Corio have been doing in their community, and to me that seems to be where it needs to start, to make the place a really good place to be. And then, as part of that, we also play a bit of footy.
Yep. Yeah, so a classic example of that is Jason Davenport, who was the North Shore coach for about 4 years. Then he coached at Carlton for the last 3 years.
Yep.
And has just finished up at Carlton and has signed on to go back and play at North Shore next year. He's only 34, 35, and probably one of the best players you'd ever want to see at local level. And he's gone back to North Shore because he believes in what the club stands for and what it does in the community. And I think that's a terrific sign, because he could have walked into any club in the GFL. They would have given anything to have him, yet he's chosen to go back to North Shore.
Yeah,
it's a good sign.
It becomes that community thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So about being a good place to be, not just a good place to play.
Yep, absolutely.
Ronnie, let's go back to 2002. VFL Premiership side, a very young side. Neil was asking about the balance of the second 18 or VFLs, and in that side you had Tim McGrath, Mitchell White and David Mensch were the only... Brent Gergic, 4 who were probably at the back end of their career, and all these kids. And I'll just give some names to the listeners. Josh Hunt, James Kelly, James Bartell, Stephen Johnson, Gary Ablett and Paul Chapman. That's 16 AFL Premiership medals around those boys' necks. Did you see what was ahead for that group of 6 way back in 2002?
Obviously thought they could be very, very good players and form the basis of a good team, but did not really understand that they would do what they did over the next 8 or 10 years from that. Gary's still doing it now, and a few of those other boys are making their mark as coaches now. James Kelly is at Essendon, and Stevie's at Sydney. Josh Hunt's academy coach up at Brisbane. So and Brent Gergic, obviously, he's a GDFL legend coaching.
Yeah, certainly is it.
So, it was an interesting mix. We had 10 first-year players, and amongst those was interesting. We had Henry Playfair, who's also been an assistant coach for about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, highly regarded in AFL circles.
Gardner, who's now a football manager at Sydney. And who else do we have?
David Johnson's doing some great work at Geelong still. And James Rowley on the coaching staff.
James Rowley, who's been coaching for 10 or 12 years in the AFL. So a number of those guys went on to have great careers and still are. And Chappie, did you mention Chappie?
Yeah, Chappie was one of the 6.
Yeah. So it was an interesting time. But I think when Bomber came in 2000, he had a plan and wanted to draft and develop his own players and make them play the way he believed the game should be played, rather than having too many people with bad habits. So we went on this incredible development journey for 5 or 6 years, and I remember he cried the first time he had to delist one of the players he drafted after about 4 years. He traded a player off to, I think it was Brent Maloney, to Melbourne, and he had tears in his eyes because that was the last thing he wanted to do. So he believed in the people he picked and the development they were making. And to be fair, the guys who achieved all that success of players came on board and changed the way that they possibly naturally played to make it better for the team. And you don't need any great example than some of the things Gary did or the way Jimmy Bartell became a slightly different player with the roles he had. Yeah, it was a really interesting journey, and certainly there was a belief that we're going to be good, but we didn't believe we were going to be that good. But Bono really aggressively approached the 2002 VFL season, knowing we had a group of young players that needed to learn how to win, and we made sure that we had enough good players in that team at the end of the year to make sure that we did win some silverware for the club and give a bit of belief.
Because I think the thing too that I've noticed, I've watched a lot of VFL footy in the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years, that sort of time, and I don't know that enough credit is given to the people who are doing the legwork at what is now VFL level. I think of Damien Carroll and Marco Bello at Box Hill, for example. The work that Gerald Fitzgerald did, I always get his name around the wrong way, Gerard Fitzgerald did at North Ballarat to bring through players who weren't quite good enough necessarily to be drafted, and I'm thinking of the North Ballarats more so than the Geelongs, that those guys that were sort of just outside of the draft mixed in with the elite who weren't old enough and strong enough to play AFL football yet. I just think that the role is so incredibly understated and understood. Can you
undervalued?
Undervalued. You know what I'm trying to say. I just think it's the whole thing. Yes, okay. Chris Scott's the coach at Geelong, but the stuff that's going on underneath to bring through those players, right from Falcons right the way through, is remarkable, isn't it?
It is, and we might see a greater impact from the second tier competitions and the junior competitions as we go forward, because there will be some restructure in AFL coaching lists and AFL playing lists. So that will be restructured in some way, shape or form, and all that's taking place now. So I think that the development roles are going to be super important for all clubs, but for the game in general. And people that you're talking about, like Marco Bello and Fitzy and Damien Carroll and David Loader from North Ballarat, who's been at North Melbourne for the last 5 years, all those types of guys are just so important and have huge skills and will be well sought after when things are sort of sorted a little bit from the mess that we're in at the moment.
And I guess the Josh Hunts, the Stevie Johnsons who are doing it in traditionally non-AFL states becomes even more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ronnie, one of the great pub discussions around Geelong and the success of the club has been the Stephen Wells factor versus the coaching structure and culture factor. I know that they're all important and they're intertwined, but I look at the likes of James Kelly, Paul Chapman and Stephen Johnson, although highly talented, perhaps an erratic personality. Had they been drafted into a less than strong culture, may or may not have made it. Would it be fair to suggest that some of these, Corey Enright's a great example, a pick at very, very high pick in the draft, but went into a great culture with lots of system and structure that Bomber Thompson and staff had set up. So which is more important, do you reckon, the selection of the talent or the environment they're in?
Well, I think people always fall in love with talented players, but I think that you can't go past the character, either of the player and the character or culture of the club. I think that overrides talent in the end. So that's my personal philosophy, is that character is far more important than talent. I mean, talent you can certainly win some games and have some tremendous excitement, but unless you have great character, either both by the player and also the character and culture of the club, you won't be successful consistently. You'll be erratic and you won't achieve what you actually are capable of achieving unless you exude that character. And sometimes it takes the culture of a club to help bring a player's character to the fore. But in general, most the players that we picked at Geelong, we tried to be guided by their character first and foremost. If they had some talent, well and good, and that makes you gravitate towards them for a start, but they still have to have good character.
Certainly the club was a big help to Stephen Johnson when he was perhaps one who was borderline brilliant talent but maybe slightly erratic personality, and great stories about Gary Ablett being challenged by the group about his work ethic as opposed to the talent. Would they be a couple of stories that confirm that the cultural stance that the club set helped those players be the best they could?
I think it certainly helped, but there's no doubt about Stevie and Gary and all those boys. They were tremendous people already, and you don't want people who are robots. You want people who have an opinion and who do things a bit differently to others, but will conform when they know what the rules are or the expectations are. So, I think that their characters were never in question. They were just sparky young fellas who had a bit of life about them and had some really strong opinions on how they thought they should play or could train or whatever. And they learnt and they listened, and some of the things that they brought to the club we actually implemented as well, rather than just being robotic about how you do things. So I think Stevie, for example, if you have a look at the way people shoot for goal now, they use the J curve kick, which he basically patented. It was him who said it's okay to kick from out in front of goal or on a 45-degree angle around your body. You don't have to go straight. So he brought that type of thinking into the game, because he loved trick shots and things like that, but it was actually the easiest thing in the world for him.
Ronnie, I know your whole sporting life's been based on team, But did you have moments in your career where you've walked away and had a quiet moment to reflect yourself and think and thought, yeah, I'm pretty happy about what Ronnie Watts produced here or contributed here?
I think I think that's why I like football, because it is about team, and you never achieve any success unless you can mould a whole group of people together. And it's the hardest game in the world to mould a group, because the ground's so big, the game's so long, the ball bounces in a funny way. You've got more people on the field than in any other sport. It is an enormous feat to be able to get people to pull together and do most of the right things. So I love footy, and that's one of the reasons. But if you can get some team success, it makes it all worthwhile. And I've been very, very fortunate to have some great people to work with. And it's sort of interesting. I have a fair bit to do with David Whedon, who's the old genius coach, working on the Next Coach program, which caters for not just AFL coaches, but high operating community and junior coaches. And we have a lot of current AFL players and some coaches doing the program alongside community coaches. And it's been really effective. So if anyone's looking for some coaching development, get onto the AFL Coaches Association website and look for the Next Coach program. And we'd only be too happy to try and cater for people if they're looking for that extra opportunity to develop. But what my point was with Dave is we work closely together now, and often I accuse him of ending my playing career because he was the reserve coach at Geelong when I was trying to have a go at making it at Geelong. And I always say, you sacked me, Dave, but you did me a favour, because I think I was a better coach than player. So when I left Geelong, I started coaching at about 23, and it was the best thing I ever did, because I always had a passion for coaching, and it helped me get on the road early with it. And it's interesting, we turn around 25 years later, 30 years later, and we're working together again in a different format.
Yeah, actually, you've jogged my memory there, because David has been on the show a couple of years ago, and it was incredible. I think it's time to get him back. I might have to look through my phone contacts again. It's great the way the David Parkins and David Whedons, who have been involved in footy for so long, are still so relevant. I think that's such an important part of the development of the game, isn't it?
Oh yeah. It's amazing to see Dave at work with young coaches, people in their 20s and 30s, and just the way he can still relate to them. And sometimes he'll tell stories about Tommy Hafey and Alan Jeans, and maybe it's not totally relevant, but he can then put a twist to it that sells a message. And he's talking from personal experiences, and then these young people go away and they research who Tommy Hafey was or who Vince Lombardi was, and they actually see the message and the learnings that Dave's trying to teach them. So he's a very interesting fellow, Dave.
Ronnie, thank you so much for your time. We won't use the word legend, but you've certainly made a wonderful contribution to local footy, and it's much appreciated, and it's a joy to talk to you and listen to your insights. And for those of you keen to watch the man in action, GDFL website, go on and you'll find a 2007 reserves game, Anarchy versus Bannockburn. Daryl Bissett, who was on the show last week, and Ronnie Watt were opposing each other that day. It will be great footy memories. There's lots of other games on that GDFL website, so get on and have a look. But Ron, thanks again for your time. Hopefully we can catch up with you again some other time. We really appreciate it.
I might even have a look myself. I don't think I've ever seen that game, and I think there's a couple of moments in it where Daryl and I ran fairly close at each other, and he's a pretty scary fella, Daryl.
He would have been a fair size of a man then, because he was quite a big man at the height of his powers, so I reckon at 43 years of age he probably would have been hard to bounce off.
He was pretty fit, actually, Daryl. He was pretty fit back then. I haven't seen him for a while, so I'll look forward to having I might jump on there today, soon it's raining, and have a bit of a look.
Good on you, Ron. All the best. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Ron.
Now,